in the department. Got it. In the Department of Teaching and Learning. And I'm also the Associate Director for Professional Development at the Bell and Blank Center. And that's where my office is. So during some of this pretty weather, you are welcome to come see the Bell and Blank Center. It's located in Blank Honor Center, and that's just north of, well, we're toward the north end of campus. And we have both the 6th floor and the 5th floor. And if you do come up to 5th floor currently, it's a floor that does mandate masks, because that's where we have our assessment and counseling clinic. And so we have psychologists who work, we probably do a greater share of the identification of what we call twice exceptional students. Those are students who are both gifted and have disabilities of some kind. So they might be on the autism spectrum, or it might be somebody with ADD or ADHD. And so they may be young when they figure out that there may be something going on there, or they may be, every now and then we run into people who actually don't learn that they were ADD or ADHD until they hit college. A lot of times high ability can mask learning difficulties and vice versa. So, but anyway, we'd still love to have you come up. You just need a mask for the 5th floor. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Randy Lang, so he can introduce himself. And then the main reason I use a PowerPoint is because I could go on and on endlessly about gifted education. I'm a real proponent, and this will keep me a little more organized. Randy, it's all yours.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Randy Lang, and I'm part-time at the University of Iowa this year, finishing up some projects I'm doing in my school district back in Illinois, which is LaGrange, District 102, for those that know Chicagoland at all. And I'm at the Bell Center. I'm the capacity of the coordinator for professional development and curriculum. And I'm working closely with people on the Academy for Twice Exceptionality, which is one of our university-based programs that we're doing a pilot program for students on campus who are diagnosed, identify as autistic, as well as being high performing. Also working on a tool called the Integrated Acceleration System with a group of people at the Bell Center. And then also, hopefully, some of you guys will take advantage of this in the future. We're working on a graduate certificate in talent development, which will hopefully morph into or lead into a master's program at the University of Iowa in gifted education. So I like being busy, and so it's keeping me busy. So looking forward to tonight. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Randy. It's so great for me to have him here, because the Bell and Blank Center is really largely focused on students. We have all kinds, we have the assessment and counseling clinic for kids who may need that service, but we have all kinds of programs for students. Now, those have, really been disrupted. But we've had several very successful programs online, even during the pandemic. But normally during the academic year, on weekends, we have programming for kids. In the summer, the building is just filled with kids, and we have kids who are here for residential programs, and we do have an early entrance program. But I was kind of the lone person who was focusing on working with educators. And so normally the majority of my work tends to be with actually teachers who are out somewhere. I work with obviously lots of teachers in Iowa, but I work with teachers from other states. And as well, I have the opportunity to work with educators from other countries. So, but one of the things that I hear, I think, as often as anything else from teachers is, why didn't we learn this when we were in our teacher training program? And it was like, yeah, well, so this is many undergrads in the College of Ed do take one of our classes. We have lots of 3-hour classes, and we would love to have you take those. But even if you don't have time for those, I mean, you guys have a really packed schedule just trying to finish the teacher education program. But this is one way that you can begin to learn a little bit more. And one of the things we'll tell you a little bit more about is that endorsement that's required by the state of Iowa to if you want to work with gifted kids. And I always say, if you earn the endorsement, there is a real plus when you are applying for jobs, because there's a shortage area. And so schools will definitely look at you if you've earned, even if you've only earned 6 to 9 of the required 12 hours. But don't do it just to get a job, because you'll get a job in gifted education. So be sure that it's something that really would interest you and appeal to you, because it will help you get a job. All right, I'm going to share screen with our PowerPoint. And yeah, Ashley, anytime if a question comes up, just toss it in the chat, and don't hesitate to interrupt me if you need to tell me what somebody has asked. Okay, I'm waiting. There we go. All right. Thanks again for being here for this little introduction to gifted ed. And you'll notice that when Randy and I talk about the field, a lot of times we're going to be talking about gifted education, but other times we're going to be talking about talent development or gifted and talented education. And that's part of the evolution of the field. It's not a static field at all. It keeps changing. And the whole focus on talent development is something that's been opening up over just the last few years. So there's my information and Dr. Lang's information. And it's easy for people to remember my name if they're familiar with either the game or the movies about Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. So if you just remember the Croft part and you look up Croft Gifted, you can track us down. But we're located at the Bellum Blank Center, and that's the taller glass center. We're just north of Pomerantz, and most of you know where Pomerantz is. And so we don't get to spend as much time in the Lindquist Center, but we are part of the College of Education. One of the things that I wanted to share is something that I do share with educators. The whole notion of gifted ed goes back a really long time. And my original training is in history, so this is kind of like ancient history. In China, over 2,000 years ago, BCE, 2,000 years in China, the emperor said, I'm sure in Chinese, but said, bring me the most able subjects you can find. But he pointed out he didn't want them focusing just on the elite. He wanted them to look among the common, the poor, because those people had talent as well. And those who did well on however it was. And I always think it's interesting if you were trying to figure out how you would identify somebody for particular kinds of talent, what would you do? And I'm really not an expert on this, and I'm not sure what all this challenge included, but those who did well were rewarded with roles that really allowed them to be leaders in their community. Those who didn't do well enough to secure a new position went back to their old lives, the lives they had been leading. This is a little more draconian than anything that we do. Those who cheated had a hand cut off as a permanent reminder that leadership demands integrity and inner strength. So I'm skipping over thousands of years now, because this year is the centennial of one of the most recognized longitudinal research studies in the country. There was a psychologist at Stanford University named Lewis Terman, and 100 years ago, he began the classic Stanford study of genius. And he utilized a revision that he had developed while he was there at Stanford. A couple of Frenchmen had developed an IQ test that they were requested to create so that the French schools could identify students who needed extra supports. So that was the original purpose of the IQ test, looking for who needed more support in order to be successful. Unfortunately, when it first came to the United States, the person who initially began using it, it was a completely different philosophy. And he was using this IQ test to instead look at sort of the genetic tradition of families who were not successful. So families with intellectual disabilities, and where that just was perpetuated generation to generation. But Terman began to revisit this with more of an eye to, again, serving students and developing their abilities. So this started in 1921. They studied 856 boys and 672 girls with IQ scores that were usually above 140. Now, I want to tell you that Terman himself has become a very controversial figure. Many of the early leaders in gifted education are controversial, and that may have something to do with why some people sort of reject the whole notion of gifted education. But at this time period in the 1920s, a movement called eugenics became popular. And if you know anything about the eugenics movement, you probably know it because it's the movement that both in the United States and certainly in Germany became associated with the Holocaust, because it was a movement that it isn't how it started. And my guess is there were very few psychologists in the early 20s who weren't interested in studying this new concept of eugenics. W.E.B. Du Bois was an advocate of eugenics. So they were looking at ways to, again, improve life for more people. But because eugenics became such a negative thing and instead became a way to make the best race or whatever, Terman himself is very controversial. But there's still a lot of value in this study that examined people with higher than average IQs. And they called the kids, I like these little obscure things. Over the years, the Terman students have been called the termites. And some of the little things that they found, part of the reason he did this study is, I don't know if you guys ever have heard the saying, early ripe, early rot. It's a real old expression that goes back generations. And it just meant that, well, these people who are really smart are not going to turn out well. You know, there were a lot of people who rejected high levels of intelligence, feeling that like they were associated with people who didn't they didn't even maintain their health as they got older. So he wanted to see it. Was this really true? But he found that these kids were physically superior, that they had fewer headaches, but more glasses, superior nutritional status, high levels of character development, especially among the girls, and that high IQ was tied to great creativity. And I put this in here not everybody with a high IQ is creative. Creativity is, kind of a separate category within this domain that we talk about. But does this make anybody, do you have any questions about this list, or do any particular thoughts occur to anybody that you want to share? When you see something like superior nutritional status, what does that say to you? And you can toss it in the chat too, if you'd prefer. Yeah, Barbara.
I actually have kind of a question about the physical superiority, higher birth weight, walked and talked earlier.
Uh-huh.
And I have 2 kids who were TAG. And they were exactly what you'd call high birth weight.
Yeah. And so you're wondering about that connection.
Yeah.
I'm guessing if somebody assessed your kids, they would probably also find that superior nutritional status. I think what a big part of this, the thing that always occurs to me when I look at this is, okay, what was their socioeconomic status? What was the socioeconomic status of the mom giving birth? Because a healthy mother is going to have a healthier and, which sometimes equated to a higher birth weight. And the fact that the kids walked and talked earlier. So if we go on to the next slide, there's a picture of the kids back in the probably more like 1940s. And they did go ahead and maintain sort of their success, academic success and professional success. I think I've changed this in one presentation, because by superiority, that was the way that it was recorded, but these weren't people, the kids in this study weren't superior in the sense that they were people who you would have heard of. They aren't the people who became famous. They aren't the people who necessarily were at the top of their field. they were successful in what they chose to do. And the sample was drawn from pretty much white, middle class, well-educated, professional or semi-professional families. So, that's also been one of the criticisms. They're doing a study of high IQ, but they included very few kids from diverse families. And I know that one of my colleagues, when I first came to the university, she was the chair of the Council on the Status of Latinos on campus. And she would tear up when she talked about having never been allowed access to any of the gifted programming that they had available in her California high school. And it wasn't until her senior year in high school with a new she was a little older than I, and this was the 60s, and they had a new counselor come into school who was kind of a hippie, and he called her in and he said, I could get fired for telling you this, but you should have had, your test scores show you should have had access to the gifted programs. And just because you didn't, don't let that stop you from going to college, because you will be successful. So, but again, part of it's, trained as a historian, I always try to look at things rather than imposing a judgment from today. I try to look at them, kind of in the way that life was, even though it isn't the way we would want life to be now. Then this study was almost 100 years ago. So this anniversary will become, its centennial will be coming up as well. There was somebody on the other coast. So we've gone from California to New York, Teachers College at Columbia University. And Lita Hollingworth began a special school for just 50 kids with IQ scores ranging from 130 all the way up to 200. And one thing that I feel like I should stress, what did I just do? One thing that I feel like I should stress is that I don't want you to get the feeling or the sense that we need IQ tests to determine gifted kids today. This is just how the field began. You had a score, it seemed to mean something, so let's study it. Most schools today do not use IQ tests. I'm not sure there's any state left that mandates IQ tests. Pennsylvania did until recently. But if you study what people are doing to determine which kids would benefit from gifted programming, they're using many different things. But this was what it was in 1926. And one of the things that I loved about her school is what she chose for the curriculum. And again, just imagine somebody comes along and they're willing to give you money so you can create the optimal school for kids. And what are you going to include? And my guess is that most of you would not choose to include French today, but French was a major language. They called it it was the lingua franca, and that's an expression that now means the language common among the learned of the world. So everybody took French, everybody took chess, everybody took dramatics. And these are some of the things that she found out about these kids who were all high ability, but quite a range of high ability. And it's because of her studies that we really recognize that gifted kids, there's as much variation among the population of gifted learners as there is among all of our other learners. So if you create programming and you think the kids are all going to be, this programming will work for all of these kids, it's not going to work that way. And this is one reason why. So she found that for kids who had 150 is quite a high IQ, that there were maladjustment possibilities for them with their friendships, with the curriculum they encountered in school, how as they grow up. Again, she followed these kids, their adjustment to whatever work field they went into. They could be antagonistic to authority, which meant whether that was the teacher in school or whether that was their boss at work. They might be really isolated in their interests and their goals. And I'm not sure why we're doing this, but I seem to be duplicating myself. So she also looked at the maladjustment possibilities for kids with an IQ of 180. And that incredibly rapid intellectual advancement, being in your neighborhood school, there was not a way for a neighborhood school to meet their needs. They really needed to be someplace else. For them, social emotional development was painful. They were little adults. And have any of you ever watched Young Sheldon? I see one or two heads going up and down. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, like adult size concerns, socialization was difficult with peers and authority figures, you ought to catch Young Sheldon, because I actually like it better than the Big Bang Theory. And Young Sheldon really is a good example of the kind of student that we're talking about and the possibility of maladjustment. So I'm going to play, and I hope, Randy, let me know if this doesn't play well, but I'm going to play a video. This video is going to focus on these kinds of kids that Lita Hollingworth was focused on, not necessarily the kinds of kids that you'll see in school, but I want you to see these kids because they are part of our communities. So have we followed, or do I need to stop share?
Yeah, I can't see the video, Lori.
Okay, then let me stop share and let me do a different share. I thought that might happen. Okay, so let's go here. And then tell me if you can hear this okay.
I can't hear anything very well.
Dr. Croft, did you press the button that says share sound?
I am not sure that I did. And there is share sound, and I'm going to optimize the video clip.
Perfect. Thank you.
Try it. So let me go back just a teeny bit.
I feel like for these kids, it's like most of the world is playing chopsticks, and these kids are born playing 88 keys. You're just taking in so much more all of the time through your sensorium, and then how do you deal with that as an individual? And you can see where a lot of things can go wrong in that system.
My name is Ryan Na. I'm currently 12 years old, but I'm essentially studying grade 11 right now. You're skipping years to go ahead because it's either it's repetition anyway, or you just feel you need to be challenged more. Just about anything could be considered science. To me, it feels kind of like a central point of everything.
I'd like to become a Grandmaster. Grandmaster is the highest chess title, aside from World Champion. There's about 700, 800 Grandmasters on Earth. I'd like to win the Youth Chess Championship, which is the World Championship for kids my age. I just find the game interesting and complex, how things can, how pieces work together in harmony to create different sets of advantages.
I love gymnastics because it's an outlet for my perfectionistic kind of qualities. The gifted experience for me is quite chaotic. It's very intense. It's very cute, but it's also beautiful and wonderful, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Kip is good at sports and he's good at math, and he's very good at writing poems.
I like the mosquitoes flying thick and wild. The spaces between them are the spaces in the thickest forest before the trees were cut down to put things in their places. The deer eat the grass so short that now they can see me. One deer steps on my chest, quite by accident, and continues there. The pressure on my chest, like 100 birds alighting, bearing all their weight.
Picking up on plays in my sport, it's kind of like, as a child, remembering shapes and colors and numbers, because with our scheme, it's a lot of patterns. So it's kind of crazy how you can see lines and patterns on a piece of paper while I'm in the huddle and they call a play. That picture that hits my head is what I'm gonna run. So I pretty much was that extra credit guy, me and a couple people. So I was always figuring out how can I get more points. But it never was to the point of like, you know, mom knew of different places, or say for instance studies or something like, hey, where can I take my son to be diagnosed for this or that? Because, you know, it was the lack of knowledge and nobody really knew about it. But teachers would always say, you know what, he's kind of bright, he's kind of intelligent. So with this gifted program, we'll have him in here for X amount of weeks. When I go to school, that's a meal. I'm guaranteed breakfast, I'm guaranteed lunch. I'm finna go learn, other than I'm going to school just because I like it. Hey, it was a way for me to survive.
My name is Kevin. I live in White Rock and I am 15. I wish to save this planet with fungi. I focused my attention on so many different things, but I believe the one I'm gonna focus on is probably mycology, my study of mushrooms. There's so much of a synergy going on within nature, and it's quite incredible.
My name is Lara, and I am 9 years old. My dad is a software engineer, and he, you know, works on the computer, and my mom is a pathologist.
The one word that I would use to describe Lara is intense.
Know this, I am a Girl Scout. I am also a fan of nature. I love geese. They're attack geese, and they're sometimes funny.
When she feels something, when she wants to go in a direction, she is very passionate about that direction.
The fact is I am a really big fan of animals.
Sometimes that is good, sometimes that is bad. If she can learn how to focus that intensity later on, that'll be a benefit to her. But as a parent, that's very challenging.
You realize that you're not the same very quickly, and you also realize that the teacher isn't quite outfitted for people of your type.
How do we engage kids? Because an engaged child will be successful. Look at how successful kids are at Langley Fine Arts, and they are. They're absolutely marvelous. And I said, you know, but there's no secret there. What you said to those kids is you have a passion for the fine arts. We're going to let you pursue it. And oh my goodness, what a shock. You're engaged. Why shouldn't that exist in every school? That's my issue.
They may have trouble relating to other kids their age, but that doesn't mean that they can't. It just means they need guidance to help them navigate.
I know I spent quite a few years in kind of almost a rejection of my emotions, just because you feel them so strongly. Like, you can't even convey how strongly they are. But if you could physically represent them, they'd move mountains. There's a princess in a tower, and that's you. But you have to display the knight outside the tower. You gotta be the fighter.
We expect a genius to be that reclusive, isolated, non-integrated, maybe cognicentric or up in his head kind of an individual. And I thought that we could be so much more. So what was it to become as a profoundly gifted person? The becoming is whether or not you can activate all the parts of you and keep developing and have it operating in some kind of harmony.
So again, these kids, the reason Dr. Sue Jackson has made this video is because she has a clinic, but it's more of an organization. I mean, it's more of an integral whole. She works with kids in Western Canada, And people will come from the US too. I mean, obviously you're seeing American football, and Canadians don't, that was an American kid, American young man, but they go to see her because they haven't felt like they fit. And, that's been part of the work that she's done. And she's won all kinds of awards for work with twice exceptional individuals, work with profoundly gifted individuals, just general work in the field itself. So let me go back now. I have to find the presentation. There we go. No, that's not it. Here we go. So let's see. Yeah. So I'm gonna leave. You see that there are those kids, and this was made recently. This was like 2015 or 16. So these are kids who are still in school and some young adults out there, and these are the lives that they are living. So in 1972, the Commissioner of Education, we didn't have a Department of Education then, but at that time, the Commissioner of Education was commissioned to do a report to see what was going on with these kids who some schools were identifying as gifted. And this is what he found. And to me, this is pretty stunning. 4% of 2 million gifted kids were being served as best they could tell. 4%. 57% of school administrators said they didn't have any gifted kids in their school. And we still run into that. We still run into school principals who will say, no, we don't have any gifted kids in our building. So gifted kids weren't being identified. And sometimes that was because they couldn't figure out the cost, well, especially if they were focused on IQ test, how are they going to pay for it? Some people just didn't care. Because they said these kids will make it on their own. And some people were hostile to the whole notion of identifying gifted kids. So the Marlin Report did all these things. It established the Federal Office of Gifted and Talented, which was dismantled just a few years later, but it eventually became the Clearinghouse on Gifted and Talented, and that's still a really useful source of information. They did provide financial support for research and development of experimental gifted programs. And those programs are still funded today, but it's called the Javits Grant. And the focus of that grant for years, for decades, has been looking at how we can best meet the needs of traditionally underrepresented gifted kids. Because many gifted programs did tend to be kind of a holdout for middle class, upper middle class kids, but the research has been focusing on, no, those aren't the only gifted kids, and how do we serve additional kids? And it provided some funding and certainly encouraged in-service preparation of teachers about the nature and needs of gifted children. And the reason I'm showing you this federal definition of giftedness has changed over and over and over. And I, one of these days, Randy and I should sit down and actually lay them, print them, lay them out side by side. Congress would actually take the time to shift just a few words in a definition. And the reality is this federal definition, it has no teeth to it. There's no mandate at the federal level to do anything for gifted students. There is a mandate to take care of, to find ways to provide appropriate interventions and accommodations for students with disabilities. There is no similar federal mandate for gifted kids, but they did create a definition. Gifted and talented kids are those, and this was important, they have to be identified by professionally qualified persons. So that's why we work with teachers on an endorsement or students in a teacher education program. These are kids who, by virtue of either their outstanding abilities and then what they have added, over the years, they wanted to add the word potential, because you might see kids who hadn't had the same opportunities because of socioeconomic status, because their parents didn't know where to find them a college for kid program or a summer camp that could develop their abilities. This initial definition just focused on the abilities. And because of those, they were capable of high performance. And then they went on to say, these children require differentiated educational programs and or services beyond those normally provided by the regular education program. And that's the key to all gifted programming, that in order for these kids to be satisfied with their own lives and to actually make the contribution they can to society, they need more because they're beyond the regular program that is provided for other kids their same age. And these are the primary factors that they focused on. And interestingly, Iowa is one of many states that still uses a definition that really ties back to this old 70s Marlin definition. So we still look, it's up to a school to decide, a district, to decide what they're going to look at, but it could be general intellectual ability, which could be measured by something like an IQ test, or specific academic aptitude, which could be measured by their standardized achievement test, by grades, by other kinds of things like that. Creative or productive thinking, which if you don't have any kind of creativity program, the only ways teachers may recognize a really creative student is that the student annoys them because they're always doing things differently from the other kids. Schools can recognize leadership ability, although very few do. Visual or performing arts. Usually programs that have a strong visual or performing arts opportunity for kids, they've had that for many years. I mean, that's expensive if you haven't had that in your building before. And then this original definition did include psychomotor ability. That was removed, and I suspect it was removed from the federal definition because a lot of schools would use gifted funding to do things like provide new football uniforms, travel expenses, things like that for their athletic teams. So they tried to separate, although it's still, as you can see in Rise, she certainly considered it, it's certainly still an area of ability, but it was just removed from the federal definition to focus on other areas. So just looking at the endorsement and the state of the states, now I'm guessing, let's see if, Randy, you'll have to tell me again if the map is actually gonna, or if the report shows up. It didn't, did it?
No, you might have to unshare.
Yeah, I think I will. So, because I want you to see it, it's a very, very cool map. The national organization, National Association for Gifted Children, has provided this map. And so the map, the legend is down here. If the states are green, and this number has increased a lot over the last several years, the green states mandate identification and programming, and they provide full funding for gifted programs. And you can see Iowa is in that category. The orange states have a definition for gifted, but there's no mandate for either identification or programming. The purple states, we don't know. We don't know what's going on in Idaho from this most recent report that was done in 1918. The red states, there's no mandate to provide services for gifted kids, and there's no funding. Now, I will tell you, California has a very strong state organization for what they call GATE, Gifted and Talented Education, but no mandate, no funding. And the yellow states have no mandate for programming and or no funding. So I just think that's a great thing that they've provided, and they update it whenever they can. So let's go back to the state of the states. So one of the things, since I've been in Iowa for so many years, I can tell you a little bit about Iowa's endorsement. And Randy's been an educator in Illinois and an administrator in Illinois. So we thought that we could share a little bit about the differences in the way they approach gifted education. So I'm trying to see, there we go. Randy, you want to talk a little bit about the State of the States report?
Yeah, this came from the executive summary, and I just pulled out a couple, it's hard to decide what to pull out exactly, but a couple of things that I would think are worth noticing here is the fact that there's just not a universal approach at all. And that's why it's just so important that folks are with us here tonight to at least, get some initial thoughts and so hopefully some interest so you can move forward and get out into the schools, especially that last bullet point. And, I didn't mention high school here, but the most common delivery method in high school is through AP courses, and the most common method through elementary school, even preschool through 8th grade, is the idea of differentiation in the general classroom. And so there's so much, a classroom teacher has to do and is responsible for. And this is adding one more thing, but it's hard to do this and do it well if you don't have any knowledge base from it. Exactly. About how to best differentiate. And so that's why it's just really important that, unfortunately, a lot of times in my own life, that so much of the stuff I did originally before coming back to Iowa to work on my graduate degrees was my own seeking of professional development. And it's like a lot easier today than it was in the early 90s when I started teaching because of the internet. And obviously you got to, hopefully you're all really good at judging sites you're on and things like that and evaluating the content. But there is opportunities between, YouTube and webinars. You get to hear from some experts without having to go to conferences and things like that. But, if you just look at these numbers where it says 42 of the states states required the definition to be used for identifying gifted students, what about the states that it's not happening in? And, even the states that, as Lori mentioned earlier, without any kind of federal teeth to this, or any mandates and things, a lot of it just gets put by the wayside. And I see that in Illinois all the time, that for a long time, Illinois years and years ago used to be a leader in gifted education. And then some, change in government that all the language and all of the funding was eliminated. So little by little language is coming back, but without any type of funding. And I am fortunate enough to be affiliated with a district that has a decent tax base and a decent budget. So, and really tight-knit community that speaks up for the kids. And unfortunately, a lot of times you'll see when you get in schools, some of the best decisions for kids, unfortunately, aren't made by the educators. They're initiated by parent groups and getting on school boards and things like that. And this is definitely one of those scenarios because LaGrange is pretty close to O'Hare Airport, and the closer you get to the airport, the less likely you are to find gifted programming at all in the schools. And so obviously when property values, the way Illinois' funding is, it's so closely tied to property tax and percentages going to the schools. As obviously house values go down closer to the airport, that the money's just not there for programs to start, especially when the state offers nothing and the federal government offers very little in that regard too. This is the range there too. Certain states reporting that 2% of their population is gifted to 19%. And so there's just, the inequities here when you read this, and just some things need to be done. And, not that I want total government control on things, but, now it's 2021 and we've been talking about these same things in my 32 years in school. And maybe it is time for a new approach. Maybe it is time for some type of mandates coming from somewhere that are a little bit more universal in nature. So we don't have, there's so much chance factor in all parts of life. And that's a big Francois Gagné idea, that chance also falls here. If you happen to be in a place where they're identifying a lot of kids, or if they're being really exclusive in this 2% place, wherever that happens to be, that it's just not fair. And so in my mind, it's an issue of fairness a lot of times. And the state of the state reports, while it shows quite a big growth from 15-16 last time they did it, there's still a lot of lack of fairness, and that bothers me.
Yeah, you know what? I may have just lost I may have to spin back through our presentation. I was so excited about what Randy was saying, that, And I'm not sure that's something you guys may not have ever really thought about, school funding, but it actually, it becomes really important because of the way things can be and might not be provided. So let's go to here. And okay, can you see that, Randy? Iowa talented. Okay,
Yeah.
so in Iowa, and again, we work with other states. So Nebraska, for example, I work with teachers from Nebraska who can earn our endorsement, and then they have a, they share, and they can migrate our endorsement in and be endorsed in Nebraska, even though if they earn their endorsement in Nebraska, it would take more hours. It would take 18 hours in Nebraska. And I hope they do that because we have such a great variety of opportunities. And so I hope it's that, not the fewer hours. The picture of teachers that you're seeing there, most of those teachers are from the state of Wyoming. Some districts mandated that their teachers earn endorsements. Only the University of Wyoming doesn't offer an endorsement. So there was no place to get it in Wyoming. And so we get to work with a lot of them. But here, if you wanted to earn an endorsement, so you've seen those really profoundly gifted kids. And like I say, the kids in most of our schools, they may not be that different. You could tell from some of those kids that you would have noticed them. But yet, almost all high ability kids, they do have these needs that are a little different unless they learn to hide them, which they may do. So the things that we focus on for the endorsement is the psychology of giftedness, and that is sort of the nature and needs of these gifted kids. Who are they and what do they need? And we have, for example, the introduction to educating gifted students, which falls in this strand. We have identification of students for gifted program, which falls in that strand. We do a lot of 1-hour workshops that are popular with teachers out in the field. And if any of you ever wanted to take some of our 1-hour workshops, because it's an extra cost for full-time students, because these workshops are designed for practicing teachers. They only last 3 weeks. They're focused on one thing. So like one is counseling and psychological issues of giftedness. If you wanted to take any of those, then the Bell and Blank Center provides a 50% tuition scholarship for the extra tuition for that 1-hour workshop. But in addition, so that's why you might think if it's 12 hours, you've only got to take 4 classes. It doesn't quite work that way here. It does at other institutions in Iowa, but we offer 1 hour, sometimes 2 hour, and then the regular 3-hour classes that fit better in your schedules. But in addition to understanding more about them, we really focus on programming, because you do need to know how to provide effective programming for these students. We offer, for example, a 3-hour class called Curriculum Concepts in Gifted Education, and one called Program Models in Gifted Education, because those two things, a program and the curriculum, they're a little bit distinct. And then administrative issues, and Dr. Lang every spring teaches a class that focuses on the administrative and policy issues. So if you look at gifted education, you end up being responsible and needing to know more than most teachers learn, because you're learning, you're hoping, I really like the idea of working with 4th graders, and so I've got to know these content areas. Gifted ed, you need to know about the ages, you need to know your content area. You also need to know the kinds of administrative issues, because the school administrator may not. And the other catch is that you need to know more than just 4th grade. You need to be able to anticipate that child working at a 5th grade level or a middle school level, so it's just a lot more. And then the practicum experience is required, but there's sort of an unusual, this is a K through 12 endorsement. So you can take an hour of practicum while you're doing one of your other practicum experiences. And that's one of the hours toward 12 hours. And we shape it a little differently, because the official practicum experience for a teacher who's going to be endorsed in Iowa is that it must be at the level for which you are not being licensed. So I was a secondary teacher. So I would have had to do my practicum, the official practicum, at the elementary level. So that's a little bit different. But you're really learning so much about everything related to schooling when you're looking at gifted education. Randy, you want to tell them a bit about even though it's not mandated it is mandated if you're going to work with gifted kids in Iowa that you have an endorsement. It's not in Illinois, but they actually have two different sorts of opportunities.
Yeah, and I can speak that I don't know a lot of people that went ahead and did this years ago, because you don't need anything to work with gifted kids or in talent development programs in Illinois. And so you can see it's 18 hours, which turns out to be expensive. It would be, groups of 3 classes. The one thing Illinois does allow you to bring in coursework from anywhere. So kind of like Wyoming, what Lori was talking about. But you kind of see the 3 areas are real similar to what Iowa focuses on. The fact that there's, characteristics, part of the traits, kind of the psychology part, as well as the identification part, and then how you're gonna pull off the program or administer the program or the programming piece there too. There's also a practicum, and then obviously you have, not obviously, but in order to get your qualification, you have to, in Illinois, there's a test for every level of education that whatever you're in elementary district or elementary certificate, you have to take a test targeted for that. And then for secondary teachers in Illinois, there's tests appropriate to your area. And then the gifted education specialist is for someone that would kind of be a coordinator, but once again, you don't need any of that either. And so this is relatively new. For a while that there was a couple of years, it was a grant that was paying for this kind of a verification type of class, and people got grandfathered in that took that, and now that's over with. And now if you wanted to have this kind of endorsement that would be added to your certificate qualifications, you have to do the 18 hours of coursework from a accredited university.
And that's one of the things I'm real interested in is trying to become an approved provider for Illinois, so that especially those of you who are from Illinois or want to go back and teach in Illinois, I want them to be able to go in and say, hey, here's my coursework I've done, because we have, our endorsement may be a 12-hour endorsement, but we have far more classes than that. So I just put this in here because some of you might be interested in joining the Gifted Teachers Listserv. It says to subscribe, you go to bellandblank.org/listserv, but you can also, just email me or Randy and ask us to add you to the listserv, and we'll be happy to do that. It's a really great place where teachers find a lot of online support from others. There are over 1,200 people on the list. They're from all over the world. And, but I've got a 3rd grader, but she's reading at a middle school level. What can I give her to read? Because young adult literature really isn't appropriate. Or what kind of program have you used for kids in this situation? Or what kind of websites are appropriate for kids when they are really ahead in math and they want to be able to do some independent work. And so it's really, it's useful, and you can subscribe and unsubscribe. And so if you do try just to see what it's like, you can certainly unsubscribe anytime after that. Another thing.
It's been really useful to me for resources. It's just so hard to keep up with everything that's available on the internet. And some people are just really good at scouring and finding things, especially things that are free. And there's a lot of really great resources out there for teachers. And so that's what I've really appreciated from the listserv for sure.
Yeah, I think I really love it. And I'm going to pause for just a minute because I just want to get a sense real quick. How many of you are elementary ed? Okay, so this one, you won't be as interested in, let me go back to the AP Institute. You won't be as interested in this one. But the AP Institute, any secondary teacher, if you want to work at the high school level, it's really good to know that Iowa sponsors the Advanced Placement Summer Institute. And we've had it online the past 2 years. And this next summer, we're looking at having both a live version and an online version. But if you want to teach an AP class, you have to have your syllabus approved, and these institutes, which are they're pretty pricey. But they take you through everything you need to know to make sure that your kids are as successful as possible and to be sure you can get your syllabus approved, that sort of thing. If you take that while you're still part of our College of Education, it's a deep discount on the cost. And then if you want to go ahead and earn 2 semester hours, it's one of those workshops I was talking about. If you want to earn 2 semester hours, you automatically get a 50% tuition scholarship for that as well, because you're a member of our teacher education program. Okay, so if we'd love to have you get in touch with us. In October, we're going to do another one of these sessions, and it's going to be focused on differentiation. And these are just little snippets, but this one, and Randy will do most of that one. But we're really pleased that you could be with us, and hope this gives you an overview. And we've got a few minutes left if you've got a question for us.
This is one real quick comment that I want to make sure that we reiterated the fact that, so often schools talk about the readiness piece so much, or the academic piece, but the social part of how kids interact with each other, as well as their own psychological adjustment with themselves, is so important with bright and really capable kids too. However, and you'll find that when you're in the schools that different places call them different, the population different terms. And that's another one of these things without a universal approach to much, that they're, sometimes called advanced learners, sometimes, talented learners, sometimes high ability, all these types of different terms. But we know the kind of kids we're normally talking about. And I'm, just working with kids for so long that just the ability to do content above what you would expect kids. They also feel differently. And that came on the video too. And how they interact with kids their age as well as older people is different as well.
Barbara, what were you going to ask?
I just had a question. I see there's 3 of them, 3 workshops, identifying talented and gifted students, and then differentiation, and another one.
Acceleration.
Right.
4 of
Right,
them.
plus this one.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can't make one of those because it conflicts with another class.
We're going to be offering more of these in the spring. And then Ashley, you have recorded it. So how does that work for them when they want to attend one and can't? And that's an Ashley question.
Yeah, just emailing the TLC at uiowa.edu is the email that we use for all TLC related questions. And then, I believe there are 4 total, I think, gifted education workshops this semester. So if you can't make one of those, let us know and we'll try to make sure you get the recording.
Okay. And then I just have one more question, and I'm sure it's for Ashley, and that's about setting up our practicum experience.
Yeah. So maybe if Barbara, if you want to stick around, or others who have TLC related questions, feel free to do so.
But we really hope you can contact either me or Randy. Just let us know if you're interested in our coursework. Most of our courses, everything that I'm doing, except for first year seminars, are online, and they have been. I mean, again, since I'm working with people who are teachers out in the field, it makes more sense for them to be online. So they would work with your schedules, and we offer them typically on an 8-week basis. So just let me know if you're interested in knowing what's coming up. Also, those 1-hour workshops. I will be sending something and asking them to share with the listservs that you guys are on for your programs, because we will be having a couple of 1-hour workshops coming up too. But thanks a lot for your interest, and take care, stay well, and let us know what else we can do.
I just want to add that something I heard stuck with me from the RISE video is the fact that talk about activating all parts of who gifted kids are, but I think it's important that you're activating all parts of who you're going to be as a teacher, and the part of you is going to be working with really bright kids. So keep developing.
Thanks,
have
Randy.
a great semester.
Hi.
Dr. Croft, I had a quick question for you really
Yes,
quick.
sure.
This doesn't have to do with what we're doing right now. I just thought I'd ask since you're here.
Uh-huh.
I emailed you last week about the Honors Opportunity Program, and I saw you were the program contact for that. And I haven't gotten your response yet, which is totally okay. I just wanted to check up and see if I should I might have a few more questions, so I can just follow up that email. I just wanted to see if you got it.
And I would love to have all of you join the Honors Opportunity Program. Yeah, follow up. And when you don't hear back from me with an email right away, just keep sending it. And you can make the subject line more flamboyant. And I tell teachers this all. I mean, I get a lot of email from teachers. I get extraneous stuff so I can share it with the listserv. But finally, I had a teacher send me an email that said, "Help, my house is on fire." And of course, as soon as I saw that, I had to read it. So Savannah, I'm also going to make a note to look for your email. And the Honors Opportunity Program is another great option for you. So
okay, thank you. I just wanted to follow up, and I will email you again with any more questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll let you guys go, and then you can stick around and ask other important questions like about practicum. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.